The sound of waves crashing against the shore should have brought me peace, but instead, my phone was vibrating with a text message that made my blood run cold. My son Marcus had just informed me that I needed to vacate the master bedroom of my newly purchased beach house because his wife's entire extended family was arriving tomorrow for an indefinite stay. No asking. No requesting. Just a cold, calculated demand that assumed I would simply comply like some servant in my own home. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. 4 months ago, I walked out of the Sterling Capitol building for the last time, carrying a cashier's check for $3.2 million. 32 years of blood, sweat, and tears had built that financial consulting firm from a one-woman operation in my basement to a powerhouse with 70 employees across 3 states. The sale had been clean, professional, and exactly what I needed to finally start living instead of just surviving. The beach house found me rather than the other way around. I was driving down the Carolina coast, no destination in mind, when I saw the weathered sign half hidden by sea grass. Private sale. Owner moving to assisted living. Something about those words made me pull over. The house stood like a forgotten guardian overlooking the Atlantic. 7,000 square feet of potential wrapped in peeling paint and overgrown gardens. But the bones were solid, and the view was absolutely breathtaking. Paid cash. The renovations took 3 months and another $500,000, but when it was finished, I had created my personal paradise. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured every sunrise. The master suite opened directly onto a private deck where I could drink my morning coffee while watching dolphins play in the surf. The kitchen was a chef's dream with commercial-grade appliances and enough counter space to prepare feasts for the family gatherings I had been too busy to host for decades. Marcus called exactly 6 hours after I sent him photos of the finished house. The conversation started normally enough with congratulations and excitement about visiting. But then his tone shifted into something harder, more demanding. Mom, Jessica and I have been talking. This house is way too big for just you. We think it makes sense for us to move in permanently. You can have the guest suite, and we will manage everything else. I remember laughing because I thought he was joking. But the silence on the other end told me he was deadly serious. Marcus, I just bought this house for my retirement. I am not looking for roommates, especially not ones who want to relegate me to guest quarters in my own home. His response chilled me to the bone. You are being selfish, Mom. After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us. Fine. If you want to be alone so badly, do not come crying to us when you realize you cannot handle living by yourself at your age. The threat was clear. Comply or be cut off from family. But what Marcus did not understand was that I had spent 3 decades negotiating with people far more ruthless than my own son. I knew manipulation when I heard it, and I was not about to let anyone, family or otherwise, take control of what I had worked so hard to achieve. I moved into the beach house on a Tuesday. By Friday, Marcus showed up unannounced with Jessica and her parents, her 2 sisters with their husbands, and a collection of nieces and nephews I had met exactly twice at family functions. 13 people total, standing in my driveway with enough luggage for a month-long expedition. Marcus walked in like he owned the place. Okay, Mom, we have reorganized the sleeping arrangements. You are going to take the upstairs guest room with the twin bed. Jessica's parents need the master because of her dad's back problems. The sisters are taking the ocean view suites, and we will set up the kids in the den with air mattresses. I stood there in my own foyer, watching these strangers march through my house like conquering soldiers claiming territory. Jessica's mother immediately began criticizing my furniture choices, moving things around to suit her taste. Her father commandeered the main television and started flipping through channels with the casual entitlement of someone settling in for a long stay. The worst part was how normal they all acted, as if this hostile takeover was perfectly reasonable. Jessica started unloading groceries into my refrigerator, pushing my food aside to make room for their provisions. Her sisters claimed my favorite reading spots and began discussing their daily schedules as if I was not even there. When I tried to object, Marcus pulled me aside with a grip on my arm that was just shy of painful. Mom, do not make a scene. We are family and family shares. You are acting like a selfish old woman who cares more about square footage than relationships. If you keep this up, We will have to seriously discuss whether you are capable of living alone anymore. There it was again. The threat disguised as concern. The implication that my independence was conditional on my compliance. And in that moment I made a decision that would change everything. I would let them think they had won. I would play the part of the defeated mother backing down from her demanding son. And then I would systematically dismantle every assumption they had made about who held the power in the situation. That night, I moved my belongings to the cramped guest room without protest. I smiled pleasantly as Jessica's family took over my kitchen, my living spaces, and my peace. I said nothing when they rearranged my furniture, adjusted my thermostat to their preferences, and treated my home like a resort they had every right to inhabit. But while they slept in my beds and raided my pantry, I was making phone calls. The first was to my attorney, Margaret Chen, who had handled the beach house purchase and knew every detail of the property's legal status. Margaret, I need you to review the ownership documents and prepare some papers for me. I'm going to need options, and I need them quickly. The second call went to my accountant, Robert Kim, who had structured my retirement finances with meticulous precision. Robert, walk me through the tax implications of converting a primary residence into a rental property. I want to understand all the possibilities. The third call was to a private investigator named James Walsh, who had helped me conduct background checks on potential business partners over the years. James, I need you to run a comprehensive investigation on some house guests. Financial records, employment history, credit reports, social media activity, legal issues, everything you can find. And I need it fast. By dawn, I had the beginnings of a plan that would teach Marcus and his entitled family a lesson they would never forget. But first I needed to let them get comfortable. Really comfortable. Comfortable enough to make mistakes they could not take back. The next morning began with chaos. Jessica's family treated my home like a hotel with unlimited room service, except I was apparently the entire staff. Her mother Patricia demanded specific brands of coffee that I did not stock. Her father Harold complained that the water pressure in the master bathroom was insufficient for his needs. The sisters bickered over bathroom schedules while their children ran through the house leaving trails of sand, sticky handprints on my windows, and an astounding amount of noise for humans so small. Jessica herself had taken over my kitchen completely, reorganizing my cabinets to suit her cooking style and relegating my carefully curated cookware to storage bins in the garage. When I gently suggested that perhaps we could coordinate kitchen usage, she looked at me with barely concealed contempt. Eleanor, you clearly were not using this space properly anyway. Everything was so disorganized. I am just making it functional for a real family. The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. A real family. As if my 3 decades of building a business, surviving a brutal divorce, and raising Marcus alone somehow did not qualify me as real. Marcus spent the morning on my deck making business calls and bragging to his colleagues about the amazing beach house his family had acquired. I heard him through the open window, describing the property as if he had purchased it himself, casually mentioning the square footage and the prime location as proof of his success. By lunchtime, the situation had deteriorated further. Patricia announced that they would be hosting a large dinner party that evening. Nothing fancy, dear, just 40 or 50 people. Some of Jessica's business associates, a few local connections we want to cultivate, and of course Marcus needs to network with some potential clients. You understand. I did not understand. What I understood was that my home was being used as a free venue for my son's business networking without my consent, my input, or apparently any consideration for my feelings whatsoever. The dinner party list appeared on my kitchen counter within the hour. 53 people confirmed, with detailed dietary requirements that would require multiple trips to specialty stores and enough food to feed a small army. At the bottom of the list, written in Jessica's neat handwriting, was a note that made my jaw clench. Eleanor, we will need you to stay in your room during the party. These are important business contacts, and we do not want any confusion about who is hosting. Thanks for understanding. They wanted me to hide in my own house while strangers ate my food, drank my wine, and networked in my living room. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. Almost. Instead of arguing, I took the list and headed into town. But I was not just shopping for their dinner party. I was setting the stage for the most satisfying revenge I had ever orchestrated. My first stop was Morgan's Catering, the most expensive service in the county. The owner, Thomas Morgan, had carried several corporate events for my company over the years, and he owed me more than one favor. "Thomas, I need you to handle a dinner party for me. Tomorrow night, 53 guests. And I want it to be spectacular. Prime rib, lobster, the full premium package. Money is absolutely no object." His eyes widened. "Eleanor, that kind of service for 53 people, we're talking about $30,000 minimum, possibly more depending on the wine selection and extras." "Perfect. Bill it to Marcus Sterling. Here is his information. And Thomas, if he has any issues with payment, you have my permission to pursue collection aggressively." The beauty of the plan was simple. Marcus had been telling everyone he was managing the property. He had given himself credit for the house, the location, and the lifestyle. So it was only fair that he also take credit for the expenses. My next stop was the local newspaper office, where I placed an advertisement that would run in the Sunday edition. Beautiful beach house available for weekly and monthly rentals. Premium location, 7,000 square feet. Sleeps 16 comfortably. Professional property management, impeccable references required. And I listed contact information for a property management company I had engaged the day before. The third stop was the county clerk's office, where I filed paperwork that would have significant implications very soon. But I kept those documents private for now. The surprise would be much more effective if nobody saw it coming. By the time I returned home with groceries that would never be used for the party they thought they were planning, I was feeling considerably more cheerful. Marcus and Jessica were on the deck with her parents, drinking wine from my collection and laughing about something that was probably at my expense. I put away the groceries they had demanded, said nothing about the catering arrangements I had made, and retreated to my tiny guest room to wait for tomorrow night's festivities. The day of the dinner party brought a frenzy of activity. Jessica's family transformed my home into what they believed was the perfect venue for impressing important people. They rearranged furniture, set up elaborate table settings using my grandmother's china without asking, and generally behaved like this was their personal event space rather than someone else's private residence. Marcus was in his element, greeting early arrivals like a gracious host and giving tours of the house as if he had personally designed every detail. I watched from my upstairs window as he pointed out features of the property, described the renovation choices, and accepted compliments with the easy confidence of someone who believed he deserved credit for everything around him. Jessica orchestrated the pre-party setup with military precision, barking orders at her sisters and mother while simultaneously taking phone calls from guests who needed directions. At no point did anyone ask where I was or whether I might want to participate in the gathering happening in my own home. Around 5 in the evening, I emerged from my room dressed in what I called my corporate battle armor. A black designer suit that had served me well during hostile takeover meetings, paired with the pearl necklace my mother had given me before she died. If I was going to crash my own party, I was going to do it in style. "Eleanor." Jessica spotted me first, her expression shifting from surprise to annoyance in a heartbeat. "What are you doing? We discussed you staying upstairs during the event." I smiled pleasantly. "Oh, I decided I would rather be present for this particular gathering. After all, it is my house." Before she could respond, the catering trucks began arriving. Not the simple barbecue setup they had expected, but Morgan's full premium service with uniformed staff, professional equipment, and enough food to feed twice as many people as they had invited. "What is this?" Marcus appeared at my elbow, his voice tight with confusion. "We were just doing burgers and hot dogs." "I thought we should do it properly," I replied smoothly. "When you are hosting important business contacts, you want to make the right impression, do you not?" The catering staff moved with practiced efficiency, setting up stations for prime rib carving, lobster service, and a champagne bar that featured bottles costing more per glass than most people spent on entire meals. The guests who were beginning to arrive looked impressed, then slightly overwhelmed by the unexpected elegance. "Mom," Marcus hissed, pulling me aside. "What is this going to cost?" I patted his arm gently. "Do not worry, dear. Since you have been telling everyone you are managing the property, I made sure all the bills would go directly to you. You wanted to be in charge after all." The color drained from his face as the implications sank in. He had claimed ownership and responsibility in front of dozens of people. Now he was financially on the hook for a catering bill that would probably exceed his monthly income. Jessica rushed over, her hostess' smile slipping. "Eleanor, we need to talk about this. We cannot afford this kind of catering." "That is unfortunate," I replied calmly. "Because Thomas Morgan does not accept cancellations once service has begun. And since Marcus authorized this party at my property, the contract is legally binding." The dinner party proceeded with all the elegance that $30,000 could buy. Guests raved about the food, praised the venue, and made lucrative business connections that would benefit Marcus's career for years to come, if he could afford to stay in business long enough to capitalize on them. I played the gracious hostess, moving among the guests with practiced ease and accepting compliments about my beautiful home with modest charm. Several people mentioned how generous I was to let my son use the property for such an important event, which made Marcus's jaw clench every time he overheard. Around 10 in the evening, as dessert was being served and after-dinner drinks were flowing freely, I made my way to the deck where Marcus stood alone, staring at the ocean with the expression of a man watching his financial future dissolve like sand castles in the tide. "Marcus, we need to have a conversation." "Not now, Mom. I'm trying to figure out how to pay for this disaster you created." "I created? You are the one who invited 53 people to my house without permission. You are the one who has been telling everyone you manage this property. I simply ensured that your claims matched reality. You set me up." His voice was bitter, defeated. "No, I gave you exactly what you claimed to want. Responsibility for this house, credit for hosting this event, and all the financial obligations that come with those privileges. We cannot pay for this, Mom. You know that. Jessica's family has been staying here for free because we are broke. The restaurant failed again, the graphic design business is barely surviving, and we are 3 months behind on our mortgage." The admission hung in the salt air between us. This entire invasion of my home had not been about family bonding or sharing space. It had been about Marcus using me as a free solution to his financial problems while simultaneously claiming credit for my assets. "So your plan was to move your in-laws into my house, take over my property, and solve your money problems by eliminating my independence." His silence was answer enough. "I have a proposition for you, Marcus. I will pay this catering bill. All $30,000 of it." His head snapped up, hope flooding his features. "In exchange, you and Jessica's entire family will leave my house tomorrow morning and never return without explicit written invitation. You will stop telling people you manage this property. You will stop claiming credit for assets you did not earn. And you will never, ever threaten me with nursing homes or suggest I am incapable of managing my own life again. What if I refuse? Then Thomas Morgan will pursue collection through the courts, your financial situation will become public record during the proceedings, and I will ensure every business contact you made tonight knows exactly why you cannot afford to pay your bills. I will also be filing a formal complaint about your attempts to coerce me into surrendering control of my property." Marcus's face cycled through anger, denial, and finally resignation. "You planned this from the beginning." "No, I gave you multiple opportunities to be respectful, grateful, and kind. You chose manipulation, threats, and entitlement instead. This is simply the consequence of your choices." The party ended around midnight with guests praising the event as one of the best networking dinners they had attended in years. Thomas Morgan's staff cleaned everything with professional efficiency, and by 1 in the morning, my house was restored to its previous condition. Except now, Marcus and Jessica's family knew they were leaving. The exodus began at dawn. Patricia complained about being forced out with insufficient notice. Harold muttered about ungrateful relatives who did not understand the meaning of family. Jessica's sisters passive-aggressively suggested I would regret alienating the only family I had left. But they all packed their belongings and loaded their rental cars with the resigned efficiency of people who knew they had lost. Marcus was the last to leave, standing in my driveway with his suitcase looking like he wanted to say something but could not find the words. I saved him the trouble. "Marcus, I love you. I will always love you. But I will not allow you to exploit that love to control my life. When you are ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial manipulation, my door will be open. Until then, I need you to leave me in peace." He drove away without responding, and I watched his car disappear down the coastal road feeling a complicated mixture of relief, sadness, and liberation. The first rental guests arrived 3 days later. The Morrison family from Ohio, a lovely couple with 3 teenage children who treated my home with respect, gratitude, and genuine appreciation. They paid $4,000 for 1 week, left the house spotless, and sent a glowing review to the property management company that would help me book solid reservations for the entire summer season. The rental income over the next 3 months exceeded $40,000. Not only had I reclaimed my peace and independence, but I had also turned my forced hospitality into a profitable business venture that would supplement my retirement income indefinitely. But Marcus was not finished trying to manipulate the situation. His next move came exactly 2 weeks after his family's forced departure, and it was more vicious than I had anticipated. I received a certified letter from a law firm I did not recognize. Henderson and Associates, attorneys at law, representing Marcus Sterling in a matter of urgent family concern. The letter was full of legal language, but the core message was clear. Marcus was petitioning for a competency hearing, claiming that my recent erratic behavior, specifically the sudden property rental scheme and the aggressive financial decisions regarding the dinner party, demonstrated that I was no longer capable of managing my affairs without supervision. He was trying to have me declared legally incompetent so he could take control of my finances and property. The betrayal was so profound I actually had to sit down to process it. This was my son, the child I had raised, sacrificed for, and supported through countless failures. And he was asking a court to declare me mentally unfit because I had refused to let him exploit me. I called Margaret Chen immediately. "Margaret, I need you to prepare a nuclear response to this competency petition. I want every piece of documentation that proves I am of sound mind, and I want evidence of Marcus's financial motivations for this action. Eleanor, competency hearings are serious business. If he pushes this, it will get very ugly very publicly. Family court proceedings become public record. But let it get ugly. Let it become public record. Because when a judge sees a financially desperate son trying to have his wealthy mother declared incompetent after she refused to give him free access to her assets, I do not think the outcome will favor Marcus." Margaret's response was swift and comprehensive. We filed countermotions that included financial forensic analysis of Marcus's situation, documentation of his threats and attempts to coerce me, and testimony from the property management company about my sound business judgment in establishing the rental operation. But we also included something else. Evidence that Marcus had been researching conservatorship proceedings for months before our beach house confrontation. James Walsh, my private investigator, had uncovered a trail of consultations with elder law attorneys, online searches about declaring parents incompetent, and forum posts where someone matching Marcus's details asked about taking control of an aging parent's assets. He had been planning this takeover long before I bought the beach house. My retirement, my purchase of property, my demonstration of continued independence had simply accelerated his timeline. The competency hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out, which gave me plenty of time to prepare. But it also gave Marcus time to escalate his campaign of harassment in ways I had not anticipated. The first incident came when the Morrison family was still in residence. Marcus showed up unannounced, pushed past them at the door, and began shouting about how I was exploiting innocent people by renting them an unsafe property managed by an incompetent elderly woman. The Morrisons were understandably alarmed and called me immediately. I contacted the police and had Marcus removed from the property for trespassing. The incident report would become part of our evidence file for the competency hearing. The second incident was more insidious. Marcus began calling my rental guests directly after they booked, warning them that I was mentally unstable and they were placing themselves at risk by staying in my property. He contacted at least 4 families, causing 2 cancellations that cost me $8,000 in lost revenue. James Walsh traced the calls and added harassment charges to our growing case file. But Marcus seemed beyond caring about legal consequences. He was in full desperation mode, throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick. The third incident crossed a line I had not imagined my own son would cross. Marcus called Adult Protective Services and filed a report claiming I was being financially exploited by unknown caregivers who had isolated me from family and were forcing me to make irrational business decisions against my will. The investigator who showed up at my door was professional but thorough. She interviewed me extensively, examined my living conditions, reviewed my financial arrangements, and spoke with several of my rental guests to understand the business operation. Her conclusion was unambiguous. There was no evidence of exploitation, abuse, or diminished capacity. In fact, I appeared to be a highly competent businesswoman managing a successful rental property with sound judgment and appropriate professional support. But the investigator also added something to her report that would prove valuable later. She noted that the person who filed the complaint appeared to have financial motivations for making false allegations, and that such misuse of protective services was a serious matter that could result in criminal charges. By the time the competency hearing arrived, I had amassed a legal file that read like a thriller novel. Financial forensics showing Marcus's desperate situation, documentation of his threats, harassment, and attempts to manipulate government services, testimony from mental health professionals who had evaluated me and found absolutely no evidence of cognitive decline, records from the property management company demonstrating sound business judgment, and witness statements from multiple rental guests about my professionalism and capability. Marcus showed up to court with a single attorney and a thin folder of evidence that primarily consisted of his own testimony about how my behavior had changed since retirement. He claimed I was isolating myself from family, making impulsive financial decisions, and behaving in ways that suggested diminished capacity. His attorney tried to paint my rental business as evidence of confusion, suggesting that a healthy person would not need to rent out their own home. But under cross-examination from Margaret Chen, the argument fell apart completely. Is it your position that operating a successful business demonstrates incompetence? Well, no, but the sudden nature of the decision suggests impulsive behavior. Mrs. Sterling sold a company for over $3 million. She has decades of business experience. She engaged a property management company, obtained proper licensing, and established a profitable operation within weeks. Does that sound like impulsive behavior or expert execution? The judge's questions became increasingly pointed as the hearing progressed. She wanted to know why Marcus had consulted multiple attorneys about conservatorship months before the beach house incident. She wanted to understand his financial relationship with me, including the failed businesses I had funded and the current mortgage problems he was facing. She wanted to hear his explanation for calling Adult Protective Services with what appeared to be false allegations. By the lunch recess, even Marcus seemed to realize the hearing was going very badly for him. His attorney pulled him aside for what looked like a tense conversation, probably explaining that not only was he going to lose, but he was also potentially facing legal consequences for misusing court resources and filing false reports. That afternoon, Marcus withdrew his petition for competency proceedings. The judge accepted the withdrawal but added a sharp commentary about adult children who misuse elder law to pursue financial gain at their parents' expense. She noted that the case file would remain available as public record, which meant Marcus's attempt to have me declared incompetent would follow him indefinitely. As we left the courthouse, Marcus tried one last approach. "Mom, can we please just talk? This has gotten so out of hand. We can fix this if you just give us another chance." I stopped and looked at my son, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. I saw the desperation, yes, but also the manipulation, the entitlement, the fundamental belief that he deserved access to what I had earned simply because we shared DNA. "Marcus, everything that has happened was a direct result of your choices. You chose to demand control of my property rather than ask to visit. You chose to threaten me with nursing homes rather than respect my independence. You chose to file false competency charges rather than accept that I had the right to live my own life. Those were all your decisions, and these are the consequences. But I am your son. Family is supposed to forgive. Family is also supposed to respect, support, and care for each other without strings attached. You have demonstrated repeatedly that your love comes with conditions, specifically that I surrender control of my life and assets to you. That is not family, Marcus. That is exploitation wearing a family mask. I walked away from the courthouse and did not look back. Later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Marcus and Jessica had separated. The financial stress of their failed businesses, combined with the public embarrassment of the competency hearing, had finally fractured their relationship beyond repair. Part of me felt sad about that. But a larger part recognized that some people need to hit absolute rock bottom before they begin to examine their own behavior and choices. The beach house rental business flourished beyond my wildest expectations. Word spread through travel communities about the stunning oceanfront property managed by a professional, detail-oriented owner who treated guests like valued clients rather than inconveniences. I was booked solid through the winter season at premium rates. But the most satisfying moment came 6 months after the competency hearing when I received a letter forwarded through Margaret Chen's office. Marcus had written it by hand, several pages of careful script that took me an entire evening to read. He apologized. Not the shallow kind of apology designed to manipulate me into changing my position, but a real, genuine acknowledgement of everything he had done wrong. He wrote about his father's influence, about the pressure he had felt to be a provider when he was actually failing at every business venture, about his growing resentment that I had succeeded where he had failed. He admitted that the beach house had represented everything wrong with his life. His mother, approaching 70, had just bought a multi-million-dollar property with cash while he was facing foreclosure on his modest home. The humiliation had driven him to try to take control of what I had earned, convincing himself it was for my own good when really it was about salvaging his own ego. The letter ended with a simple statement that surprised me. He was not asking for money, forgiveness, or another chance. He was simply acknowledging the damage he had done and accepting that our relationship might never recover. But he wanted me to know that he was getting therapy, working on understanding his entitled behavior, and trying to rebuild his life without expecting me to fund it. I sat with that letter for a long time, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and amber. Part of me wanted to crumple it up and throw it away. But another part, the part that remembered holding baby Marcus, teaching him to read, and celebrating his small victories, wanted to believe that people could change. I did not respond immediately. Instead, I let 6 more months pass while I watched for evidence that his words matched his actions. I heard through mutual friends that he had gotten a steady job in corporate design, that he was consistently paying his bills on time, and that he had stopped blaming other people for his problems. A year after the competency hearing, I sent Marcus a brief letter with 2 sentences. I have read your words and I am watching your actions. When you have demonstrated consistent change for at least another year, we can discuss having coffee together on neutral ground. It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation. But it was a tiny crack in the door, a possibility that perhaps someday, if he did the work and truly changed, we might rebuild something from the ruins of our relationship. In the meantime, I lived my life exactly as I had dreamed. The beach house brought me joy, income, and a steady stream of interesting people who treated my home with respect. I took art classes, volunteered at the local library, and built friendships with other retirees who understood that aging did not mean surrendering independence. Some evenings, I still thought about Marcus and wondered what our relationship might have been if he had approached me with honesty and respect instead of manipulation and threats. But mostly, I focused on the life I had built, the peace I had claimed, and the future that was mine to shape however I chose. The greatest lesson I learned from the entire ordeal was simple but profound. Sometimes protecting yourself from family is not selfish. Sometimes it is the most important act of self-preservation you can perform. And sometimes the people who claim to love you are actually more interested in controlling you. My beach house stands as a monument to that truth. Every rental guest who arrives and treats my property with respect is a reminder that I made the right choice. Every morning I wake up in my master bedroom without anyone demanding I move to smaller quarters is a victory. Every sunset I watch from my deck without anyone threatening my independence is a gift. Marcus had tried to take this from me, had tried to convince me that I was too old, too incompetent, and too selfish to deserve what I had earned. He had been wrong on every count. And in proving him wrong, I had reclaimed not just my house, but my dignity, my autonomy, and my right to live life on my own terms. The beach house rental operation generated over $75,000 in its first full year. I used some of that money to establish a scholarship fund for women over 50 returning to business school. If my story could help even one woman understand that it is never too late to start over, to claim independence, or to refuse to be controlled by entitled family members, then perhaps something good had come from the whole difficult experience. 2 years after our courthouse confrontation, Marcus sent another letter. This one was shorter but more powerful. He had been consistently employed for 18 months, had paid off his debts, and had completed a year of therapy focused on understanding entitlement and learning to build relationships without manipulation. He was not asking for anything except permission to prove he had changed. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. The man who sat down across from me looked different, older, more worn down by life but also somehow more genuine. The cocky entitlement was gone, replaced by something that looked like actual humility. We talked for 2 hours. He did not make excuses or try to minimize what he had done. He simply acknowledged the damage, explained the work he had been doing to change, and expressed hope that someday I might be willing to rebuild some kind of relationship with him. I did not commit to anything except additional meetings. Trust, I explained, was not rebuilt in a single conversation. It required consistent demonstration over time that the changes were real and permanent. Marcus accepted those terms without argument. We began meeting monthly, brief coffee shop conversations where he updated me on his life, and I listened with cautious optimism. Slowly, over the course of another year, I began to see evidence that he had genuinely changed. He got promoted at his job. He maintained consistent employment and financial stability. He never asked me for money or tried to manipulate me into supporting him. He respected my boundaries without complaint. And most importantly, he took responsibility for his actions without trying to shift blame or minimize the severity of what he had done. 3 years after the beach house confrontation, I invited Marcus to visit the property. Not to stay, just to see what it had become. He walked through the house with genuine appreciation, complimenting the rental operation and acknowledging that I had created something truly special. As we stood on the deck watching the sunset, he said something that finally began to heal the deepest wounds. "Mom, I am so sorry I tried to take this from you. You deserved every bit of peace and joy this place brings you. I was wrong to think I had any right to it. Thank you for not giving up on me completely, even when I gave you every reason to." That was the beginning of a cautious reconciliation. We would never have the relationship we once had, but perhaps we could build something new, something based on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. The beach house continues to be my sanctuary, my income source, and my reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Every happy guest who leaves a 5-star review is a victory. Every morning I wake up in my master bedroom is a celebration. Every decision I make about my property without anyone's permission is an affirmation of my independence. Marcus may never fully understand the gift he gave me by trying to take everything away. Because in fighting to keep what was mine, I discovered a strength, determination, and sense of self-worth that I had been too busy to recognize during my working years. The beach house is not just a property. It is proof that you are never too old to start over, never too vulnerable to fight back, and never too family-oriented to demand respect. It stands as my monument to independence, a testament to the power of refusing to be controlled, and a reminder that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is teach them that exploitation has consequences. As I sit here now, watching another sunset paint the Atlantic in brilliant colors, I know I made the right choice. The beach house is mine. My life is mine. My future is mine. And no one, not even family, will ever take that from me again. But life has a way of testing your resolve when you least expect it. Just when I thought the chapter with Marcus was finally finding some peaceful resolution, Jessica reappeared in my life like a ghost from a nightmare I thought had ended. It was a Tuesday morning when I found her sitting in her car at the end of my driveway. She had been waiting there since dawn, she explained, because she needed to talk to me urgently. Against my better judgment, I invited her inside, keeping our conversation in the formal living room rather than the comfortable spaces I reserved for people I actually trusted. "Eleanor, I know you have no reason to help me, but I need you to understand what really happened during that time at the beach house. Marcus was not the only one driving those decisions. My family, especially my mother, they manipulated both of us." I listened with skepticism as Jessica spun a tale of family pressure, financial desperation, and her mother Patricia's controlling influence over every aspect of their lives. According to Jessica, Patricia had convinced them that taking over my beach house was not just reasonable but actually doing me a favor by preventing me from making foolish decisions in my old age. The narrative was carefully constructed to paint Jessica as a victim rather than a willing participant in my exploitation. But I had not survived 3 decades in business by falling for sob stories designed to manipulate my emotions. "Jessica, I appreciate you coming here, but nothing you have said changes the fundamental facts. You participated in taking over my home, treating me like a servant, and supporting Marcus's attempts to have me declared incompetent. Whether you were manipulated by your mother or not, you made choices. Adults are responsible for their choices." Her face crumpled in what looked like genuine distress. I know. But there is something else you need to know. Patricia is planning something. She has been talking to lawyers about suing you for emotional distress, claiming that the way you threw us out damaged her health and reputation. The audacity was breathtaking. After invading my home, exploiting my hospitality, and supporting attempts to control my finances, Patricia was now threatening to sue me because I had enforced my boundaries. "Let her sue," I said calmly. "I have documentation of everything that happened, witness statements from multiple sources, and legal precedent on my side. If Patricia wants to make this a public court battle, I am more than prepared for that fight." Jessica leaned forward, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "You do not understand. Patricia is not just suing for money. She is building a case that you are a danger to elderly family members, that you have a pattern of abandoning people who need you. She has been contacting other relatives, digging up old family stories, trying to construct a narrative that makes you look like the villain." The manipulation was subtle but clear. Jessica was trying to frighten me into some kind of preemptive action, probably offering reconciliation or financial settlement to make Patricia's lawsuit go away. But I had learned my lesson about family members who created problems and then offered to solve them for a price. "Thank you for the warning, Jessica. But I will handle Patricia the same way I handled Marcus. With legal precision, documented facts, and absolute refusal to be intimidated by threats." After she left, I immediately called Margaret Chan and James Walsh for an emergency strategy session. If Patricia was building a case against me, I needed to know exactly what she was planning and how to counter it before it gained any traction. James's investigation revealed that Patricia had indeed been consulting with lawyers, but not about emotional distress. She was exploring whether she could claim that I had stolen family heirlooms during the eviction from the beach house. Specifically, she was claiming that several valuable antiques that had belonged to Jessica's grandmother had disappeared after they left my property. It was pure fiction. I had never had any of Jessica's family possessions in my home. But Patricia was betting that the accusation alone would be damaging enough to force me into a settlement just to make the scandal go away. Margaret's response was swift and strategic. We filed preemptive legal action documenting everything that had been in the beach house before and after Patricia's family stayed there. We obtained statements from the rental guests who had been present during the transition. And we sent Patricia's attorneys a very clear message that any fraudulent claims would result in countersuit for defamation and malicious prosecution. The bluff worked. Within a week, Patricia's attorney quietly withdrew the inquiry, and I received a terse letter stating that there had been a misunderstanding and no legal action would be pursued. But the incident reminded me that some people never stop trying to manipulate situations to their advantage. 3 months later, I received an unexpected visitor who would change my perspective on family in ways I had not anticipated. My younger sister Rachel, who I had not spoken to in over 5 years due to her own complicated relationship with boundaries and money, showed up at the beach house unannounced. Rachel had always been the family member who borrowed money she never repaid, who showed up during holidays expecting to be hosted without contributing, and who had a talent for creating drama that somehow always resulted in other people solving her problems. We had stopped speaking after she borrowed $15,000 for a business venture that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. "Eleanor, I know you probably do not want to see me, but I need to tell you something about Marcus and what happened with the beach house situation." I considered closing the door in her face, but curiosity won out. Rachel came inside and sat nervously on the edge of my couch, looking around the beautifully maintained house with something that might have been genuine regret. "Marcus called me before he brought Jessica's family to stay with you. He told me he had a plan to take over your house and asked if I wanted to be part of it. He said we could split the property, use it whenever we wanted, and you would not be able to stop us because you were getting too old to manage things properly." The revelation hit like a physical blow. This had not been a spontaneous decision or a response to Jessica's family pressure. Marcus had been actively recruiting other family members to participate in a coordinated takeover of my property. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Rachel looked me straight in the eye for the first time since arriving. "I told him he was out of his mind. That you had earned everything you had, that you deserved to enjoy your retirement without your ungrateful children trying to steal from you, and that if he went through with his plan, he would regret it." The honesty was unexpected and surprisingly refreshing. Rachel had her flaws, but apparently attempting to steal her sister's house was where she drew the line. "I came here to apologize, Eleanor. Not for Marcus but for myself. For all the years I treated you like a bank rather than a sister. For all the times I took your generosity for granted. And to tell you that what Marcus did was unforgivable, and I wanted you to know that not all of your family supported it." We talked for hours that afternoon, the longest honest conversation Rachel and I had ever had. She told me about her own financial struggles, her recognition that she had spent decades making poor choices and expecting other people to bail her out, and her recent efforts to build a stable life without exploiting family connections. I did not immediately trust Rachel's transformation. Years of manipulation had taught me to be cautious about sudden changes of heart. But over the following months, she proved herself through consistent actions rather than empty promises. She got a steady job, paid back a portion of the money she owed me, and maintained boundaries without asking for anything in return. The contrast between Rachel's genuine effort to change and Marcus's earlier manipulative reconciliation attempts was striking. It reminded me that people reveal their true character not through their words but through sustained patterns of behavior over time. The rental business continued to thrive, and I expanded operations to include hosting small weddings and corporate retreats. The beach house became known as one of the premier event venues on the Carolina coast, generating annual income that exceeded my initial retirement projections by a substantial margin. One afternoon, while preparing for a wedding event, I received a phone call that brought unexpected closure to a chapter one thought had ended. It was Patricia, Jessica's mother, and she sounded nothing like the entitled woman who had taken over my master bedroom years earlier. "Eleanor, this is Patricia. I am calling to apologize for my behavior during our stay at your beach house and for the legal threats that followed. I have been going through therapy after some health issues, and my therapist has been helping me understand how my controlling behavior damaged relationships with everyone around me." The apology was detailed, specific, and included acknowledgement of particular incidents that had been most hurtful. It was not a manipulative attempt to regain access to my property or money. It was simply a genuine expression of remorse from someone who had done the difficult work of examining their own toxic patterns. "I appreciate your call, Patricia. I genuinely do. But I need you to understand that while I accept your apology, it does not mean I am willing to have you back in my life. Some boundaries, once violated, remain in place permanently." She accepted that without argument, thanked me for listening, and ended the call. Later, I learned from Rachel that Patricia had been diagnosed with early-stage cancer, and the health scare had prompted serious reflection on her life choices and relationships. Sometimes it takes mortality to teach people lessons they should have learned decades earlier. The 5th anniversary of buying the beach house arrived with a celebration that would have seemed impossible during those dark days of Marcus's takeover attempt. I hosted a party for everyone who had supported me through that difficult period. Margaret Chen, James Walsh, Robert Kim, Thomas Morgan, and surprisingly Rachel, who had earned her place through consistent demonstration of changed behavior. We stood on the deck watching the sunset, and Margaret raised her glass in a toast. To Eleanor Sterling, who taught us all that it is never too late to fight for your independence and never wrong to demand respect, even from family. As glasses clinked and conversations flowed, I realized that I had built something more valuable than a successful rental business or a beautiful beach house. I had created a chosen family of people who valued integrity, respected boundaries, and understood that love without respect was just manipulation wearing a prettier mask. Marcus sent a card for the anniversary, a simple note acknowledging the milestone and expressing continued hope that someday we might fully reconcile. His marriage to Jessica had officially ended, and he had apparently moved to a different state for a fresh start. The therapy he had mentioned years earlier seemed to be ongoing, though our relationship remained cautiously distant. I kept the card but did not respond immediately. Some wounds take years to heal, and some relationships need to be rebuilt so slowly that progress is barely visible. Time would tell whether Marcus's changes were genuine and lasting or just another manipulation strategy with a longer timeline. The beach house rental operation expanded to include 3 additional properties I purchased over the following years. Each one was carefully selected, meticulously renovated, and professionally managed through the same company that had helped me build the original business. By year 7 of my retirement, I was running a multi-million-dollar property management empire that provided income for myself and employment for dozens of local residents. The irony was not lost on me. Marcus had tried to take control of my beach house because he thought I was too old and incompetent to manage property properly. Instead, his attempted exploitation had pushed me to build a business larger and more successful than anything he had ever achieved. Some evenings, I still thought about that phone call when Marcus first demanded I move to the guest room for his in-laws. I wondered what would have happened if I had simply complied, if I had let fear of isolation or aging override my instinct for self-preservation. How long before they convinced me to sign over power of attorney? How long before my independence was completely eroded by people who claimed to be protecting me? The thought sent chills down my spine because I knew exactly how that story ended. I had seen it happen to other women, other retirees, other people who loved their families too much to recognize when that love was being weaponized against them. My beach house stood as a monument not just to my success but to every person who had been told they were too old, too incompetent, or too selfish to deserve control of their own lives. Every rental guest who arrived and treated my property with respect was proof that dignity and kindness still existed in the world. Every sunset I watched from my deck was a celebration of autonomy hard-won and fiercely protected. The final piece of the story came on a rainy Tuesday morning 8 years after the original confrontation. Marcus called, his voice shaking with emotion, and asked if he could visit the beach house one more time. Not to stay, not to ask for anything, just to say something he needed to say in person. Against Margaret's advice, I agreed. Marcus arrived alone, looking older and weathered by life in ways that suggested he had been through his own difficult journey. We sat in the living room, the same space where so many battles had been fought and so many boundaries had been established. Mom, I have been working with my therapist for 6 years now, and we have finally gotten to the root of why I did what I did. It was not really about the house or the money. It was about feeling like a failure while watching you succeed. Dad spent my entire childhood telling me I would never measure up, that I was weak and incompetent compared to you. When you sold your company and bought this beautiful house, it was like proof that he was right. That you were strong and I was pathetic. I listened without interrupting as Marcus unraveled years of psychological damage inflicted by his father. My ex-husband Harold had been a controlling, emotionally abusive man who I had finally divorced when Marcus was 16. But apparently, the damage he inflicted lasted much longer than the marriage. So when I saw this house, I did not see your retirement dream. I saw evidence of my own failure. And instead of dealing with that healthily, I tried to tear you down to make myself feel better. I tried to take what you had earned because I could not face the fact that I had not earned anything myself. The honesty was raw and painful and more genuine than anything Marcus had said in the previous 3 decades. It did not excuse his behavior, but it provided context that helped me understand the broken psychology that had driven his actions. I am not asking for forgiveness, Mom. I am not even asking for a relationship if you do not want one. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I did and why it was so unforgivably wrong. You deserved peace and respect, and I gave you manipulation and threats. That was not love. That was abuse dressed up in family obligation. We talked for 3 hours, the longest substantive conversation Marcus and I had ever had. He told me about his continued therapy, his stable job, his efforts to build authentic relationships without manipulation, and his acceptance that some damage cannot be fully repaired. As he prepared to leave, I made a decision that surprised even myself. Marcus, I'm going to say something I never thought I would say. Forgive you. Not because what you did was acceptable, but because holding on to anger and hurt for the rest of my life serves no one, least of all me. His eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Mom. That means more than you know. But I am not done talking. I forgive you, but our relationship will never be what it was. You will never have unlimited access to my life or my home. You will never make decisions about my finances or property. And if you ever cross my boundaries again, this conversation will be the last time we speak. Do you understand? He nodded, accepting the terms without argument or negotiation. It was, perhaps, the clearest sign that his changes were genuine. The old Marcus would have tried to negotiate, to push boundaries, to see how much he could get away with. This Marcus simply accepted the consequences of his actions with something that looked like genuine humility. After he left, I sat on my deck and cried. Not from sadness or regret, but from the release of carrying years of betrayal, anger, and grief. Forgiveness, I realized, was not about excusing what had been done. It was about refusing to let past wounds poison your present peace. The beach house business continued to flourish. My chosen family of friends, colleagues, and even Rachel, who had proven herself trustworthy through years of consistent change, celebrated holidays together in the space that had once been ground zero for family warfare. Marcus and I maintained cautious contact, monthly phone calls, and occasional coffee meetings where we slowly rebuilt something that resembled a parent-child relationship. It would never be easy or uncomplicated, but it was honest in ways our relationship had never been before. On the 10th anniversary of buying the beach house, I hosted a massive celebration that filled the property with laughter, music, and people who had earned their place in my life through respect and genuine affection. As I looked around at the faces of people who treated me like a valued person rather than a financial resource to be exploited, I realized something profound. The greatest gift Marcus had given me was not the beach house itself, but the opportunity to learn that I was strong enough to stand alone. That I did not need family approval to make decisions about my own life. That independence was not selfish, it was essential. The sunset that evening painted the Atlantic in shades of purple and gold, and I raised my glass to toast the journey that had brought me here. To second chances, I said. To chosen family. To boundaries that protect rather than isolate. And to every person who ever refused to surrender their independence just because someone else found it inconvenient. The beach house stands today as proof that you are never too old to start over, never too vulnerable to fight back, and never too family-oriented to demand respect. It reminds me every single day that the most important relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself, and that protecting your autonomy is not selfishness, it is survival. Some people spend their whole lives learning to say no to family members who exploit them. I learned it at 64, and it saved my life. Not from physical danger, but from the slow erosion of self that comes from prioritizing other people's demands over your own well-being. The rental business now generates over $200,000 annually. I have established scholarship funds, donated to women's shelters, and created opportunities for other retirees to start businesses in hospitality management. The money Marcus tried to steal has been multiplied and shared in ways that actually help people rather than enabling their worst impulses. As I sit here now, watching another magnificent sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, I know with absolute certainty that every decision I made was right. The confrontation was necessary. The boundaries were essential. The legal battles were justified. And the slow, cautious reconciliation with Marcus was done on my terms, at my pace, with my conditions firmly in place. This is my house. This is my life. This is my story. And nobody, not family, not fear, not societal expectations about how elderly women should behave, will ever take it from me again. The beach house is not just property. It is freedom made tangible, independence made visible, and self-respect made permanent. And that is worth more than any amount of money or any definition of family obligation could ever be worth.